Welcome back to Learn with Chris. I'm Chris. So today we're going to start talking about Norse mythology, and I'm going to look at two things for today. The first thing is, who were the Norse? And the second is, how do we know about their mythology and their culture and their history? So the books that they wrote, or the information that we have that we know about them, because we're talking about more than 1,000 years ago. So let's look at the first question. Who were they? Who were the Norse? You've maybe heard the word Viking, and you're more likely to have heard the word Viking than you are to know the word Norse. They're used interchangeably, but they don't exactly mean the same thing. So the Norse were a Germanic people. Germanic means from the area of present-day Germany, so Central Europe. So they were from Central Europe, and they migrated north from Central Europe into Northern Europe, which today we call Scandinavia. So, and this happened approximately 500, 600 CE. So about 1,500 years ago, they moved from Central Europe to Northern Europe in a migration. And they settled in present-day Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. And a few centuries later, they went west into Iceland. So the current countries of Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, these would be the ancestors of, the Norse would be their ancestors. Now, what are they very well known for? The Norse, or the Vikings, were known for a few things. The first thing that they were known for is raiding. They got on their ships, their long ships, and they sailed down into areas like England, Ireland, France, into Europe, and they raided. They attacked, they killed people, they took the treasure and the gold and animals and slaves, and they brought them back home. So it was a kind of like a pirate, but not exactly the same as a pirate. So they were very feared. People were very scared of the Norse because, or the Vikings, because they would come like in the middle of the night, and they would just get off their ship and they would attack a monastery or a village, and they would kill everybody and take everything, and then they would leave. So they were very, very feared during a period of time that we call the Viking Age. The Viking Age is said to have began in 793 CE. That's when the Vikings first went to England, and they attacked a monastery at Lindisfarne. That's the traditional beginning of the Viking Age, when they attacked a monastery in England. And it ended, again, the traditional date of the end of the Viking Age was about 300 years later in 1066 at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, also in England. So a period of 300 years, the Viking Age, when they were very active in Northern Europe, Western Europe. Now, another thing that they are very well known for is exploring and exploration. They got on their ships, as you could see from an example picture here, and they would explore. So they discovered, obviously, Iceland, and I think that was in the early 800s. And then later on, they went further west to current-day Greenland, and then even further west, and they went down to current-day North America. And it was really amazing because they were on these open long ships on the Atlantic Ocean. So they discovered North America 500 years before Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus very famously discovered North America in 1492. But actually the Vikings, particularly Leif Erikson, or Leif the Lucky, in the year about 1000, he discovered what they call Vinland, which is in northern Newfoundland, a province of Canada in North America. So the Vikings were in North America a full 500 years before before Christopher Columbus was. But they didn't stay. They were only there for, I think it might be 10 to 15 years, and they eventually left and never returned. And the last thing that the Norse were known for, or it's important in history, is that they settled a lot of places. So in addition to the raiding from like Denmark or from Norway, they were raiding down into Ireland, France, England. They settled in these places too, because I guess there was better land in Ireland or France, more fertile land, better for farms. So they ended up moving there. They ended up migrating out of Scandinavia into these countries, into these places. So Normandy in northern France was settled by the Norse. Danelaw in England. Pretty much all of Ireland was completely controlled by the Vikings for a very long time. So they settled a lot, and this is important because of the history. The history of England is very much connected with the history of the Norse, and the English language itself is also very heavily connected to the Norse language as well. Okay, so that's who the Vikings were. They were explorers, they were raiders from Central Europe, moved up into Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and they, so that's the Norse, who they were. Now, how do we know about them? What information do we have about their stories, about their culture, their history? There's two main sources, written sources, I would say, the Eddas and the Sagas. So this is an example of an Edda. You can say here, this is the poetic Edda. So these are poems. These poems were written probably in the 900s and the 1000s, and they were compiled together into what we call the Poetic Edda today, about 1200, so about 800 years ago, more or less. And these are mostly the stories that we know about the Norse gods. We know about Odin, Thor, Loki, and the adventures that they went on, the things that they did. It's largely from this. So these are stories, poems about Norse gods and heroes as well. It's not only about gods, it's also about heroes. And the other Edda is called the Prose Edda. I don't own it, I don't have it, but I'll put a picture up on the screen of the Prose Edda. Now, the Prose Edda was written again in the 1200s by a Icelandic chieftain called Snorri Sturluson. And it's, again, a lot of stories about the Viking or Norse gods and mythology. But the complication with the Prose Edda is that it is heavily influenced by Christianity. In the year 1000, so a full 200 years before the Prose Edda was written, Iceland converted to Christianity. So and this is one of the reasons why the Norse the Viking Age ended because they became Christian. So they didn't follow their old gods anymore, the gods of like Odin and Thor and Freya. They didn't believe in them anymore. So Snorri Sturluson was a priest, and he was trying to talk about the Icelandic stories, the stories of his ancestors. But it's pretty clear from the Prose Edda that there's a lot of Christian influence in it. So it's not exactly, it's hard to divide what did the Norse believe in, say, 800 or 900 before the Christian influence came there. So the Prose Edda is a bit complicated. The Poetic Edda is, let's say, more authentic, because we know that the Poetic Edda, some of the stories predate Christianity. They were written before the Christian influence in Iceland, for example. Now, I mentioned sagas as well, Eddas and sagas. So there's a whole bunch of sagas. I'll show you one. This is the saga of the Volsungs. So sagas are stories, just like the Eddas, but they primarily focus on historical or maybe not historical, maybe mythical figures. So there's a lot of Icelandic sagas about an Icelandic king or an Icelandic warrior, and it's like the story of that person. We know a lot about Viking culture, what did they believe from the sagas. The Volsungs is more of a almost like a mythical family, but it's very fun to read. So we have, of course, this one. We also have Egil Saga, Njal Saga, and the Saga of Eric the Red. And that's the one where they described actually going from Greenland down to Vinland, and the Saga of the Greenlanders, where they discovered these places. So, and the last thing I would say about how do we know about the Vikings and what they believed, archaeology. We have rune stones, we have carvings, we have burial mounds, we have physical evidence of their culture. So related to the saga of Eric the Red, in the 1960s, I can put a picture here on the screen. This is Lance Meadows. And Lance Meadows is in northern Newfoundland. And in the 1960s, archaeologists from, I think, Norway, they uncovered this settlement in northern Newfoundland, which is largely believed today to be Vinland. It's from the saga of Eric the Red and the saga of the Greenlanders. They described going to this place that they called Vinland and what they did when they were there. And archaeologists used those stories to try to find the actual location. And as of today, Lance Meadows is the only settlement found, the only Viking settlement found in North America, excluding Greenland. But I'm not sure we can consider Greenland to be North America because it belongs to Denmark. So although it's right next to North America, I don't think it's North America. So only Lance Meadows in Newfoundland, in the northern part of Newfoundland in Canada, is the only archaeology, the only actual place we have found where Vikings settled. So it's largely believed to be Vinland from the stories. So again, we have archaeology evidence and information about the Vikings. We have their stories in the Eddas and in the sagas. So, to recap, who were the Norse? Well, they're also called Vikings, and they were Germanic people. They migrated from Central to Northern Europe to current-day Scandinavia. And they, from, again, around the years 700 to about 1000, they were very active in Europe. They were raiding, they were exploring, they were settling places like England, Ireland, and France. They were very, very important in history, particularly British history. And how do we know about them? Well, we have their stories written in the Eddas and written in the sagas. And we also have archaeology as well. Okay, so that's kind of a starter. I wanted to begin with Norse mythology by telling you who they were and how do we know about them. But in the next lesson or the next video, I'll talk specifically about Norse mythology, their gods, their beliefs, the special things that are core to Norse mythology that makes it different from other mythologies. So, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day, and bye-bye.